everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Doctor Who Panel to Panel. I am Jeremy B. Mensch, your host, welcoming you to episode 166 of this podcast all about Doctor Who comics. If you are a fan of Doctor Who comics, that's probably why you downloaded this episode or listening to this podcast. So welcome. Here is what we have on tap for today. We will start out like we always do by checking out the news, see what is new in the world of Doctor Who comics and art. And then we will jump into a couple reviews. This time around, we are going to take a look at Liberation of the Daleks, Part 11, which is the newest part of that strip from Doctor Who Magazine, issue number 594. And then, since I just couldn't get enough fill or get a big enough fix of the Golden Emperor Dalek, I am going to go back in time to 1965 and go into the Matrix to check out Plague of Death, the classic Dalek strip from TV Century 21 from back in 1965. Then we will have a really good interview with somebody who I haven't had a chance to chat with for quite some time. It's been a couple years since he probably first took over Doctor Who magazine. It's current, or was current at the time of this interview, but now he is the outgoing editor of Doctor Who magazine. Marcus Hearn had a chance to chat with me about what has gone on in Doctor Who magazine over the past couple of years, what has happened over the past year in particular, since the return of Russell Davies to the executive chair of Doctor Who in way of TV, how the magazine has changed since the change from Chris Chibnall to Russell T. Davies, and what kind of gives us a teaser of what to expect for the anniversary coming up here in November, and lots of other stuff. It was great to chat with Marcus. I love chatting with him. He let me know after the fact of this interview that he was going to be stepping away from being editor of Doctor Who magazine, but he made a point of letting me know that he is not going away too terribly far. He is still going to be working on the book-a-zines, which have been really, really good. I highly recommend those if you haven't been checking out those. The different eras or the different years in particular have been really good. But he is going to be working on some special projects for Doctor Who magazine and Panini. So it's not the end of Marcus Hearn, but I want to say, Marcus, I think you've done a great job on the magazine, and you've made the magazine something really special for us Doctor Who fans. So job well done, sir. And I think you will hear from this interview with him just how much passion he has for Doctor Who and how much work he has put into this magazine. So there's kind of the rundown of what's going on. Along those lines, I want to thank everybody for downloading this episode. I want to mention that if you want to get this episode without all the bells and whistles, I have set up a Patreon page, and for a $5 a month subscription, you can download the episodes without all the reviews, with just basically kind of the bare bones interview episode. Some people just love listening to the interviews. So if you want to help support the podcast and not listen to me quite so much, jump over to patreon.com/Doctor Who Panel to Panel. You can also pitch in for as low as $1 a month just to say, hey, I love your podcast. Help me keep the lights on. Help me pay the bills of supporting the podcast. That would be appreciated. Also want to mention that I have a website, DoctorWhoComics.com, where you can go for news about Doctor Who comics and animation. You can go there twice a week to read a comic strip called The 10 Doctors by Rich Morris, who did an excellent strip back in the David Tennant era, involving all the first 10 Doctors, and a wonderful, fun story. Every Monday and Thursday, there's a new part of that is posted. And so please check out my website, DoctorWhoComics.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Doctor Who Panel to Panel, or you can find me on Twitter at Doctor Who P2P. I guess it's not Twitter anymore, it's X. But you can find me on that platform. I'm on Instagram at Doctor Who Panel to Panel. And that's enough promotion, I think, for right now. So let's jump into this episode. Let's check out the news. In Doctor Who comic news for this episode of Doctor Who Panel to Panel, let's start out like we always do by checking out the calendar. Let's take a look at the month of August. We'll start out with Wednesday, August 2nd, which was a few weeks ago, or That was when Doctor Who Doomsday #2 came out from Titan Comics, the finale or the ending to the Doomsday story from them. Also over here in the United States, for physical copies of Doctor Who magazine, issue number 589 was released that same day in comic shops. So if you are a collector of the physical magazines, that's where you can find that. Jumping ahead a couple weeks, the next release would have been, of course, this past week on Thursday. Doctor Who magazine issue number 594 came out digitally as well as on the newsstands over in the UK. I know some people are having trouble finding it or tracking it down at their news agent over there, but by now, by the time you hear this, that should have all been resolved, and you should be able to find the new issue wherever you normally get your magazines. Then we are going to jump ahead to the month of September, and I believe on September 1st, on that Friday, is when, from Panini, the Cybermen Complete comic strips, the big collection is coming out. It is a big 350-page tome of just nothing but Cybermen stories. I am a huge Cybermen fan. I am really looking forward to getting that book. It's not going to be here in the States for a month or two after, but make sure you go out and grab that while you can. And then the only other thing I have on my calendar is on Thursday, September 14th. That should be the release date for Doctor Who magazine issue number 595. Which will be the first issue with new editor Jason Quinn taking over as editor of Doctor Who magazine. That's kind of a lead-in to what else is new in the world of Doctor Who comic news. Marcus Hearn revealed just before the release of issue number 594 that he was going to step down as editor of Doctor Who magazine, but he is not going away. He is staying on to work on the bookazines and some other special projects. He is just kind of handing over the reins of the magazine to Jason Quinn. Jason was somebody who has been working for Panini for quite some time. He has done some editing on the comic strip in Doctor Who magazine. He also was the editor of the Doctor Who Adventures magazine, the magazine for younger readers back in the Peter Capaldi days. So he is not a stranger to Doctor Who. He's been a fan of the show forever and a day. He's been reading the magazine since issue number 1, according to his Facebook page. And congratulations, Jason. I look forward to chatting with you sometime in the future once you kind of get settled into your new role and see your opinion and your thoughts about what it's like to be editor of Doctor Who magazine. About the only other news I can think of that is kind of not really comic related, but along the same lines, they announced just last week that the Underwater Menace is going to be animated and coming out on DVD just in time for the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. It's great to see that the animations are carrying on. I know Gary Russell was someone who worked on the animations the past couple right before they announced that they weren't going to do anymore. But if you go back and listen to the last interview I had with Gary, he mentioned that he was pretty sure that the last one he worked on was not going to be the end to it. He was sure that it was going to continue on, and it looks like he was right, because we are going to have the Underwater Menace coming out just in time for the anniversary, at least for those of you over in the UK. Those of us here in the States will have to wait and see when it shows up. But that is it for the news as far as I can tell, and let's go on to a couple reviews. It is time once again to open the Pandorica on a new Doctor Who comic strip. This time we are going to take a look at Part 11, the penultimate chapter of Liberation of the Daleks, which is in Doctor Who magazine issue number 594. Of course, the story is written by Alan Barnes with art by Lee Sullivan, coloring by James Alfredi, lettering by Roger Langridge. Marcus Hearn is the editor of the strip, and the Daleks were created by Terry Nation. Where we left off last time, Georgie had enlisted the Daleks' help to trap the Doctor and make him turn all of the virtual Daleks and virtual Georgie into a real, living, breathing creature. They know they need the Doctor's help in order to do this, so they trap him. And they also, Georgie connects with Georgette on the Dalek vacation world, the Dalek Dome, and uses Georgette to take over all the people that are in the Dalek Dome. The Golden Emperor Dalek asks the Doctor what to do or what they need to do in order to become real creatures. And the doctor says, well, you need a bunch of mathematicians because it's going to take billions and billions and billions of calculations in order to turn all the billions of atoms that are imaginary or fake or not real into real atoms. And that is when the golden Dalek reveals that they actually have a moon full of mathematician creatures that can do all these computations. Of course, the Daleks have something up their sleeve and are prepared for just such an emergency. But as this goes on and continues, the Daleks then reveal that once they do become real, they are going to do what they always do, which is try to take over the universe and turn everything, all the creatures, into Daleks, which kind of gets Georgie to start to think about maybe what she's wanting to do is not such a great thing. Her becoming real, yes, that is good, but having the Daleks become real, maybe not so much. And that is where it kind of leads into the cliffhanger, which will then become the next issue and the finale of this story arc. My opinion on this part, it is ramping up to a good climax. I think you can I almost kind of felt this was coming and that Georgie's going to start having second thoughts about what she's doing and maybe change her mind about things. But leading up to this, I thought was a good story. Great artwork, of course, by Lee Sullivan. And the story's been really good, although to me it's been a little... I almost feel like I need to go through and give it a reread straight through. And I'm really looking forward to the collected edition coming out once it's all said and done, just because I want to read the story straight through. I think reading it from month to month and chapter or part by part, I've kind of lost a bit of the flow. And I think reading it all together will make it flow a little bit better. But I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great story. Any story with the Daleks, of course, is a good story. But Alan Barnes has taken that good and made it great. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have as well. One more chapter to go on Liberation of the Daleks, so make sure you grab the latest Doctor Who magazine and check it out. Exterminate! It is time to go into the Matrix like we do on Doctor Who Panel to Panel from time to time. And this time around we are going to continue our journey looking at the classic Dalek comic strip from TV Century 21. And we are up to a 7-page story called Plague of Death. This was in TV Century 21, issues 33 through 39, and they came out back in 1965. The writers were David Whitaker and Terry Nation, and Richard Jennings, of course, is the artist for these Dalek strips. If you want to read along with these or read this story, there was an excellent little bookazine called The Daleks that Panini put out a year or so ago that has these strips. You can also kind of find them online if you do some searching around for them, but they're really cool. So, let me start out with the plot synopsis to tell you what the story is about. I am reading from the Comic Strip Companion, an excellent reference book by Paul Scoons, and here is his plot synopsis. An accident in a Dalek war factory results in a radioactive rust particle cloud being released into Skaro's atmosphere. The Black Dalek learns that the rust particles have a devastating effect on Dalek casings. Daleks at a monitoring station in the desert are affected by the cloud. The Daleks destroy the station, but the rust particles attack an airborne Dalek patrol. The rust cloud approaches the Dalek city. The brain machine advises the Black Dalek to use magnets on the cloud. The cloud is successfully neutralized with electromagnets, but the rust mutates into a plague that attacks Dalek casings. The plague causes widespread panic in the Dalek city. The Emperor Dalek arrives back on Skaro. Studying the remains of a plague victim, the Emperor determines that the Black Dalek is an unwittingly plague carrier. The Black Dalek is hunted through the city. Learning that he is the carrier, he attempts to destroy himself through exposure to the plague, but the Emperor decides to save him. The Daleks fail to notice the arrival of an alien spaceship on Skaro. So that is what the strip is about. Basically, just like it says in the title, Plague of Death. I thought the story was interesting because it kind of, like Paul says in his comments about the strip, it kind of turns the tables on the Daleks and actually has something attacking them and them feeling threatened as opposed to them just going out throughout the galaxy and causing havoc and trying to take over the whole universe. Having a rust cloud as an enemy, I thought was an interesting change. As it started off, I kind of laughed because to me it seems kind of silly, just having this cloud that the Daleks accidentally create. It just kind of hovers over the planet and then just randomly drops on something. It's almost like it almost feels like it's a sentient cloud, but it's not. And I thought it was just interesting to see how the Daleks are scared of this and trying to figure out how to overcome it and how to defeat it. I thought the use of electromagnets was an interesting way to go about doing that. I have nothing wrong with that. I thought it was really neat. I like how the rust cloud then becomes a plague that starts attacking the Daleks much the same way that the rust cloud did, so they really didn't defeat it. It just kind of changed. And it's up to the Golden Emperor to come back from his travels to figure out a way to defeat it along with the Brain Machine. So Richard Jennings' artwork, of course, is stunning, just like it always is. And he is. If you want a master class on how to draw Daleks, in between reading these Dalek strips and reading Liberation of the Daleks, currently in Doctor Who magazine, with Lee Sullivan's artwork, these two are the guys, your go-to guys for Dalek art, at least in my opinion. Plague of Death was a fun strip. Back in 1965, if I was a kid reading this in TV Century 21, I know I would be really impressed and excited and wanting to see what happens from week to week and only getting a page at a time. So it's a good strip. If you haven't had a chance to read it or any of these classic Dalek strips, I highly recommend the bookazine The Daleks from Panini to check these out.
You will be deleted.
Today on Doctor Who Panel to Panel, I have the extreme pleasure of welcoming back the editor of Doctor Who magazine, Marcus Hearn. Marcus, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Jeremy. It's lovely to be on air with you again.
It's great to chat with you again. It's been a little while. Well, let's get right into it. How are things going with Doctor Who magazine now? I know you're hard at work, or have been hard at work, getting ready for the anniversary specials. How crazy has it been?
Well, I mean, things have changed an awful lot since we last spoke. When did we last speak? Remind me.
It's been probably a couple of years. I know it was somewhere in the middle, probably, of the Chibnall era.
Good grief. Wow. Well,
it's been a while.
Things in the world of Doctor Who have changed a lot. And Doctor Who magazine have changed a lot. And we loved working with Chris, and we're loving working with Russell as well. The magazine has changed a lot, as you've probably noticed.
Oh, most definitely. When the Chibnall era ended and we went into the Davies era, the change over in the magazine seemed just night and day to me.
Yes, yeah. I guess it may have seemed quite sudden, but we've been talking to Russell for a while before that happened. And so when the big transformation came, which I guess was last November, I think, a long time sort of batting ideas backwards and forwards, and Russell was very clear about what he wanted. He doesn't always tell you exactly how he wants you to do something, but he tells you about the direction he'd like something to go into.
Okay.
And then you come back to him with ideas, and and I think it's been fantastic. It's so exciting working with him, and I think the effect on the magazine has been very positive.
Yeah, I totally agree. So when he came to you, what did he say he was looking for in the magazine?
Well, there were a couple of things. I think the most important thing was that he wanted the magazine to very closely align with developments and progress on the television series, which of course is, obviously what you'd love to hear as an editor and a licensee. However, of course, when we had these conversations, we were still some way away from, some way off from the television series. His iteration of the television series actually beginning. We're still several months away from that now. And so, yes, absolutely. Of course, we wanted to be more in sync with the television series. And so the conversations we had were on the lines of, well, how can we do that when the show's not actually on the air yet? And the greatest gift that he gave us was, of course, the comic strip.
Yeah, most definitely.
because we'd seen you'd see the 14th Doctor at the end of the Power of the Doctor, and he said, "Well, I'm going to give you the 14th Doctor. You can continue the 14th Doctor story until he's on television," which was just absolutely fantastic. What a privilege, because the Doctor Who magazine strip has been around, well, in the various forms that Doctor Who magazine has existed since 1979. And of course, there's also been a strip, as you know, before that, going back to 1964. But it's always existed in a kind of parallel universe from the actual show itself. Usually contains features the same. Obviously, the Doctor contains sometimes the same characters as well, but it's never quite been it's never been in lockstep, as it were, with the television series,
right?
Until now, until Russell suggested that we could actually bridge the gap between the Power of the Doctor and the first ever 60th anniversary specials, and that was completely his idea. So I think that of all the things we discussed, obviously we talked about bringing his column back, which is very key to do.
Yeah,
we changed the title, but it's still his column, because it used to be called Production Notes, but we changed the title to Letter from the Showrunner because he also suggested that we have another column, which is Scott Hancock's Production Diary.
Sure.
And of course, you want two columns that have got the word production in the title. And so I suggested to Russell that we could call his column Letter from the Showrunner because, in my mind, that harks back to the Des Skin, Paul Neary days of Doctor Who, when there used to be a letter from the Doctor.
Yeah.
And readers with very long memories may have known that the illustration of Russell the illustrations of Russell that we've commissioned from Martin Garrity kind of echo the illustration of the Doctor, which used to appear on the Fourth Doctor's Letter from the Doctor back in Doctor Who Weekly. Except I think back in those days he was writing with a quill. Now Russell's typing with a laptop.
Yeah, a little bit of change in technology there.
Yeah, exactly. Just to update people. And there have been various other things, and there will be more to come, as you'll see. But I do think it's safe to say that the most important innovation was Russell's suggestion that we actually align the strip with the show's continuity. Back on my first stint on the magazine staff many moons ago, there were efforts by Gary Russell, the editor, and Peter Darvill-Evans, the editor at Virgin Publishing, the editor who looked after the Doctor Who and New Adventures, to align the strip with Virgin Publishing's New Adventures books, because although I wasn't involved in that decision, I guess the perception at the time was that the New Adventures books were providing the official continuity.
Yeah.
So, so that was a thing. That was a thing that happened, I think, in the early 90s, at least for a while. But as I said before, the strip's never been aligned with the actual continuity of the actual TV series until now. And so I think of all the things we discussed, that was the most exciting.
Yeah, I could totally appreciate that. Did you have a lot of readership that spoke out and said, it's great to see that the comic strip is part of continuity now, at least for this story?
People are very intrigued, and I think we've had a huge amount of feedback. I mean, the strip's had some tough times. I think we've mentioned during our last discussion that we had some tough times during the pandemic.
Yeah,
obviously everybody had a tough time during the pandemic, and one of the particular sort of work-related struggles that we had was just keeping the magazine going on its regular schedule, because many magazines couldn't. I remember we talked about that last time.
Yeah, yep, we sure did.
Had to fall by the wayside, at least temporarily, was the strip, because it is one of the most complex and most budget munching elements of the magazine, and so we had to rest it occasionally. And we tried some text stories for a while, which I think worked really well. But I think that the strip has seen some tough times in the last few years because of what everybody had to go through, etc. And I think that this suggestion from Russell was a real shot in the arm for the strip and for the magazine. And the feedback we're getting has been incredible. I mean, it's really, I think it's really elevated the strip. I mean, I think when the magazine started back in 1979, I think Deskin's conception of the magazine really saw the strip as first and foremost, I think. And I think under subsequent editors, Paul Neary, I think, so on, when the magazine went monthly, I think the strip has always been part of the magazine's DNA. The magazine's rather eccentric DNA. But the strip has taken second place, I think, to the feature content.
Yeah.
For many years and for many years. And this is completely, this decision of Russell's has completely reversed that. I think has put the strip right back up top, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think it's interesting how when Russell came back to the show and seeing the importance of the comic strip as being part of continuity and putting the 14th Doctor in there, I think not only that shows kind of in Russell's eyes how important the strip is, but also taking, one of the anniversary specials coming up, the first one coming up is the Star Beast, which is taking the talking about the Deskin era, taking, the comic strip from back then and kind of doing a TV version of it. I think that also kind of shows how important the comic strip is, at least to Russell Davies, is, how much that means to the history of Doctor Who.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also been very useful for me as the editor, because Russell wants to align the magazine as closely as possible with the TV series, which of course is something that we want to do as well. But as I said earlier, because when this decision was made, we were still a long way off from the new David Tennant episodes and the strip, and the popularity of the strip and the prominence of this strip allows me to do things like, as we did at Christmas, to actually put Liberation of the Daleks on the front cover.
Yeah.
Because the challenges I had at Christmas was that there was no festive episode. There was no Christmas or New Year episode. And so throughout my editorship of the magazine, there's always been a big seasonal episode to forefront.
Yeah.
It wasn't this year. And so we sat around and thought, well, what can we do? And I thought, no, we actually have new Doctor Who. We have new Doctor Who within the magazine, within the strip. Liberation of the Daleks is our cover story. And so I was able to put the comic strip on the cover of the magazine as the cover story for the first time since, well, goodness knows when. I mean, I'm sure you know better than I do the last time this actually happened. I'm guessing it was probably during John Freeman's era. I'm thinking probably.
Probably. You've stumped me on that one, but that sounds probably about right, because that would be
people listening who will know. But I would probably around 1990, around then. I think probably was the last time that happened. Which is a long time, isn't it? Years. But and we did it in a rather different way, because I think when John did it, I think he commissioned Lee Sullivan, about whom I'm sure we'll be talking about very soon, to create the cover image for it. And I was slightly wary of actually commissioning comic strip artwork for the front cover of the magazine, because despite everything I've said, we are primarily a magazine more than a comic strip, and there are other comic strip licensees out there, of course.
Yeah.
And so, the answer to do it is to create computer-generated art, which is what we did. The Dalek Attack from Liberation of the Daleks, and so and so having the comic strip so prominent and accepted as readers as a very prominent part of the magazine, enables me to forefront the new series, even at a time when we weren't really bringing prominent feature material about the new series online in the magazine, because it was far too late to do that, and we didn't have the material anyway. And so the strip's been, aside from a fantastic boost for the magazine, it's also been very useful from that point of view as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and we couldn't have done that if it hadn't been received so well.
Yeah, I think the strip's been really good, and it's the first thing I always read when I open up. You go to my new Doctor Who magazine. What was with Russell coming up and saying, let's do a 14th Doctor strip? Was it him and Alan that came up with the idea for the story, or how did that just kind of come about?
Yeah, as I said, he said that he gave us this opportunity, and I think he said the original stipulation was that he wasn't prescriptive about a story or anything like that. He wanted us to come back to him with the story. He just
Okay.
Russell lit a fire under the idea of doing it in the first place, and then he threw it over to us and said, "What are you going to do? What do you want to do?" His only stipulation was that we had to set the story within an hour of real time in the newly regenerated Doctor's life.
Sure.
That was his original stipulation, but he didn't. He then he wanted to hear ideas. He wanted to see stories. He wanted to see suggestions about writers and artists. So I gave it very careful thought, and I drew up a short list of writers and a short list of artists. And I then had discussions with Russell and with Scott Hancock, the Doctor Who script editor.
Mm-hmm.
And it went from there, really. But I was very glad that Russell was happy with Alan Barnes as the writer and Lee Sullivan as the artist. There were other people on the list, and some of them we may bring in down the line, but I think that he was pleased. Let's talk about Alan first of all. He was pleased about Alan first of all because I think that when Russell said that he wanted the strip to last for a year, and that he wanted to fill just an hour of the Doctor's life, my excitement about the idea sort of quite soon turned to sort of anxiety, because I thought, well, something nice. I came back to him and said, but this will be the longest strip in the magazine's history.
Mm-hmm.
And he just said, yeah. And I said, how come, if it's just an hour, it's going to be quite difficult for us to sustain a story over that length of time. That's just an hour. And he quite rightly, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he just basically told me to go away and make it work. And he was quite to do that. And I remember he said to me, I said, it's going to be very difficult. And he said, no, nonsense, he said. Think Charles Dickens. Think Flash Gordon. Think cliffhangers.
And
he was absolutely right, of course. And so I think that Alan was a perfect choice, really, for a number of reasons. But one of the principal ones was that he'd written the Infinite Quest for Russell.
Sure.
Was years ago, which of course was multi-episodes, cliffhangers, all over the place.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I mentioned Alan's name to Russell, he was like, "Yes, absolutely, the Infinite Quest," because he remembered it. And he was and we talked about cliffhangers and about how well Alan had handled the Infinite Quest, quite aside from his pedigree as a comic strip writer and editor. And so he was very, very pleased with Alan. And then we had to think about choice of artists. I mean, I can't remember who said to Russell and Scott early on, "Can we have Daleks?" I think it was me.
Mhm.
And Russell was very enthusiastic about it. Yeah, I love Daleks. He said, "Love Daleks." And of course, when it comes to Daleks, I think that really the Doctor Who magazine, the Doctor Who magazine Dalek strips are so closely associated with Lee Sullivan's work.
Yeah, I totally agree.
He's the only guy that can do Daleks. But I mean, I think, when we think Doctor Who magazine strip and Daleks, all of us who've been reading the magazine for a long time think about Lee Sullivan. And Russell himself said, "Well, it's got to be Lee, isn't it? If it's Daleks, it's got to be Lee." And so that's how those names were selected from the shortlists that I shared with Russell and Scott. But I mean, Alan, I don't think had written the DWM comic strip since, I think this is the first DWM comic strip he'd done since 2007.
Yeah, it was quite some time, wasn't it, for him to get back into the swing of things?
Yeah, and Lee, I mean, I'd worked with Lee on other things over the years. I'd worked with Lee on some collections of comic strips based on the Super Marionation series.
Oh, sure.
And Lee had done some cover illustrations for me for those. I'm not sure when that was. That must have been probably 15 years ago, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came back to Doctor Who magazine in 2012, I think it was, editing originally by editing the bookazines. The first bookazine that we worked on was about Daleks and was done for the 50th anniversary. And there was an article in there about Terry Nation's original draft of the first Dalek story, which I think was called The Survivors. And one of the challenges in that magazine was to illustrate an article about the survivors when, of course, there were no stills.
Yeah.
Because the article was really focusing on the differences between the survivors, his original draft, and the mutants, aka the Daleks story that was ultimately transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to the editorial director at the time, "I'm going to need a budget to illustrate this," and because I myself have been away from Doctor Who magazine for quite some time, I thought, well, if it's Daleks, it's got to be Lee. And so I worked with Lee on the Jerry Anderson stuff. It was a Thunderbirds illustration that he'd done for me, and he. I remember calling him up and asking him to do this, and he delivered a fantastic illustration for the Daleks bookazine in 2012. I think it came out in 2013, which ran across a double-page spread. And after he delivered it, and we had a chat about it, and he said to me, "Do you know, this is the first illustration I provided for Doctor Who magazine since, well, for about 10 years."
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Really? Like that?" Because I've been a bit out of the loop myself. And he was, "Yeah, it's been about 10, maybe 11 years." And I was really surprised that he hadn't worked on the magazine for so long. I'm not sure why he hadn't worked on the magazine for so long. But then, as of, I think it was last year, when I started editing the Doctor Who magazine strip myself, I mean, I've been involved with it before, but when I actually took on sort of sole editorship of the Doctor Who magazine strip, I thought back to that conversation and thought, well, hang on, we had that chat with Lee back in 2012. We're now 10 years on from that, so it must be 20 years, incredibly, since he did a DWM strip. And I mean, this is we need to get this guy back.
Yeah, definitely.
He's one of the great Doctor Who magazine artists, and so I called Lee about this, and I mentioned that we had a short list because we were going to present Russell with a short list of writers and artists, and would he mind if I added his name to it? And he said, yeah. He said he'd love to come back. I
Hmm.
mean, I think it had been so long that I don't think he even thought that maybe he would illustrate another Doctor Who magazine strip. But I'm glad to say that he was happy for me to put his name on the list. I'm glad to say that Russell said, "Look, for his Daleks, it's got to be Lee." And so Lee Sullivan's back, and so we've got Alan for the first time since writing a strip for the first time since what 2007. We've got Lee illustrating a strip for the first time since I think 2001 or 2002.
Hmm.
And, James Afridi, who's been with the strip for a long time, is doing the colouring and doing some fantastic work. And of course, Roger Langridge doing the letters. He's been around for a very long time.
Yep.
Um, well, dare I say it, I think it's an absolute dream team. Really, I think the work they're doing is outstanding.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree.
I couldn't be
It's like getting the
happier.
band back together after all these years.
Yeah, basically, I just get so excited when the pencils come in and the inks because it's just it's awe-inspiring stuff. I think it's wonderful what they're doing, and I'm really happy that people have responded to it so positively.
Yeah, it's been really good, and we're kind of in the home stretch of the story too. There's not too much more to go. Can you give us a teaser or anything as to what to possibly expect once Liberation of the Daleks wraps up?
Well, we've got a little way to go on Liberation of the Daleks, and as we discussed with Russell at the beginning, we dovetailed with the Power of the Doctor,
Hmm.
which is kind of tricky, as I remember, because I think Lee's doing the inks as well as the pencils, because that's how he likes to work,
Yeah.
yeah, which is great because the results are fantastic. And I remember when we did episode one, we had to deliver the inks before Power of the Doctor had been broadcast. And so I remember he did episode one, and we had to leave certainly the first panel of page one empty
Hmm.
because although we'd seen, trying to think back now, although I'd seen a preview, I've been to a screening of the Power of the Doctor, but as is often the way when you receive, when you're lucky enough to get previews of Generation episodes, um, you don't get to see the end.
Yeah.
Preview screening kind of stops
Uh-huh.
30 seconds before the end. And so I didn't know how uh, exactly how Power of the Doctor was going to finish, or exactly what it was going to look like when it finished. And so we had to leave that panel empty. But we eventually sorted that out with the BBC, and we
Sure.
got and we were able to match the first panel of Paradox, which was done right at the first panel of the first episode of Liberation of the Daleks. We were able to match it precisely to what we'd seen on screen,
Hmm.
Power of the Doctor, with the BBC's help. But that was kind of dropped in very last minute.
Very last minute.
And so the idea is that we dovetail with End of Power of the Doctor, and we will, although we haven't come to this yet, the idea is that we will dovetail with the beginning of the episode, which we now know is going to be the Star Beast.
Okay. Yeah, I guess one other question I have is it's been great that the Liberation of the Daleks has been a in canon tie-in to the TV show. Is there any chance we're going to get a treat of having that maybe possibly continue on? I'm guessing probably not. This might be a one-time only thing, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Well, I think that it's safe to say that, as you said, Russell takes a very close interest in the strip, and we're talking to Russell. We're going to talk to Russell about what's coming next because Liberation is nearing its conclusion, and
Hmm.
so we're going to think very carefully about that dovetailing at the end. I'm going to think very carefully about what happens next,
Sure.
and so I'd be very happy if we can maintain our very close links with the TV series.
Yeah, that would be great.
Mm.
I'm like I said, the comic strip's always something I always go to right away when I get the new issue of Doctor Who magazine. But the articles and stuff that you've been doing all as production has been going on have to me have been really great and informative and giving a really good job of teasing what we're going to be seeing here for the anniversary of the show. Is there anything special that Doctor Who magazine is going to do to help commemorate the 60th anniversary of the show?
Yes, we're going to be doing a special 60th anniversary publication, which we're working on at the moment, and I can promise you it won't be anything like any issue of Doctor Who magazine you've ever seen before. It's going to be quite different, and we spent a long time. We started working on the ideas for it last year, in fact, last
Okay.
December, and that's going to go into production soon. And so that's a fantastic thing. We've again with Russell's help and encouragement, we've had writers on set of the TV show for quite some time now.
Yeah.
And so we've been gathering an awful lot of material, which we've kind of banked. You know, some of it has appeared, but obviously we have to take our lead from the BBC about how they want the publicity and their marketing for the show to unfold in the months leading up to it.
Sure.
And we're very happy to fit in with their plans. And so you'll have seen some stuff already. We've got a fantastic interview with David Tennant and Catherine Tate, conducted by Emily Cook. And there's lots more of that stuff to come, because we've again, with Russell's help and encouragement, we've had people on the set throughout, and so our coverage of the new episodes is going to be extensive, and the magazine is as you probably noticed, it's already shifting towards being more and more current and more connected to the series than it certainly ever has been while I've been the editor.
Yeah.
And that's only going to grow and continue over the coming months.
Well, that's awesome. That's great to hear. I think Doctor Who magazine, as time has gone on, it's still kind of is the leader in a publication that is based on a media property that has been going on for so long. But DWM is also kind of the leader in doing the best of covering that. I don't think there's any other like TV or movie publication out there that can match what you and your crew do to cover the show that you are doing this magazine for.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that. I mean, we work very hard, but it's lovely to hear you say that. It's we're aware, of course, that there's an enormous amount of stuff out there on the internet, and that there is an awful lot of Doctor Who that you can access for free, just at the click of a button. But I hope that we can continue to provide the sort of depth of coverage that you won't see anywhere else, and the kind of insight that you won't see anywhere else. And I keep coming back to Russell here, but Russell's great. Is a great advocate for the magazine, and the access that he's given us since he's returned has enabled us to do that, and enabled us to do even more in the coming months. And the comic strip is just a part of that. But the editorial we've got coming up is just fantastic, and I'm so excited for people to see it.
No, that's awesome. A couple questions I have for you, kind of peripheral to the magazine. You got a couple really good collections that I'm looking forward to coming out. The Cybermen Ultimate Collection that is coming out, and also the Fourth Doctor Anthology. I was wondering what was going to happen as far as with the Star Beast coming out on for the anniversary on TV, how we were going to get a reprint of the actual comic edition. And so what was the thought process with doing the Fourth Doctor Anthology?
Well, I'm going to say straight away, that's not a project I was involved in.
Okay.
But, because I don't handle the comic collections, but
sure.
Star is obviously going to be part of that. But I mean, it was something that was inevitable, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would think so. Anyway,
I think there'd have been something seriously wrong at Panini Tower if that idea hadn't occurred to somebody there. But so Star Beast will be appearing as part of that. Yes, and we'll be hearing from Dave Gibbons and from Pat Mills within the pages of DWM itself.
Oh, that's good.
because of their connection with the whole thing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm looking forward to these collections coming out. I'm a big Cybermen fan, more so than the Daleks probably. So seeing a lot of these backup strips that haven't been reprinted before, I'm looking forward to. Um, so
Yeah. I mean, I guess it goes all the way back to Croton, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. And the cover that they're going to have for the uh, the collection, I think, is just amazing. It's just I was stared at that for a half hour just looking at how beautiful it was.
Yeah, again, I can't claim any credit for that at all. I thought it was amazing as well. But one of my all-time favorite Doctor Who magazine comic strips is The Flood.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and
Yep.
chance to have that as part of a comic collection, brilliant, brilliant. I love that strip.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Doctor Who magazine has coming up for the anniversary special, and also speaking of anniversaries, issue number 594 is going to be the next issue coming out in a couple weeks' time, but that's only 6 issues away from big issue 600, and
Yes, absolutely. It's got a milestone, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I know how amazing the 500th issue was. What are you going to try to do to top that?
500 was a bumper issue, wasn't it?
It sure was.
We also did quite a package for the 40th anniversary issue as well.
Uh-huh.
Yes, we have ideas for the 600th issue, and I hope we're going to be able to package something very special in there as well. But I'm afraid, to quote John Nathan Turner, you'll just have to stay tuned.
Yeah. No problem. That's still 6 issues away.
It's a wonderful thing, and also the 600th issue will be published at the beginning of February, I think, and that will be in a period just after the Christmas episode has been broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that obviously the world of Doctor Who is going to go crazy for the 60th anniversary, the return of David Tennant, etc.
Yeah.
And then a festive episode, and then there'll be this pause afterwards where we can all sort of take a breath. I think that issue 600 will appear during that period. So I think it's a great time. It will give us, I hope, a great spike of interest.
Sure. I'm sure it will.
After the TV episodes have been broadcast, but yeah, we have an idea for that, and we're aware that it's quite a milestone, and it's something that we have to do properly.
Yeah.
And but we're going to put together, I hope, a fantastic package for that.
Well, I wouldn't expect anything less from you and your crew. One last question I have for you. Right now, it's kind of the calm before the storm that is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, not to mention whatever Russell Davies and company have in way of the new series and all the rumors we've heard about spin-off series and what's going to be showing up on Disney Plus and stuff. As the editor of Doctor Who magazine, what you've done since Russell has come back kind of leading up to this has been amazing, but with the possibility of how popular Doctor Who could once again become once the anniversary hits and the new series starts next year and it's back amongst the zeitgeist of fans worldwide again, people that may have lapsed from the previous regime till now with so much of a space with nothing really new on the airwaves to see. Do you have any kind of apprehension or fear as to how big your task or your job is going to be to keep up with all of this?
Well, we've been preparing again with, I keep coming back to this, with Russell's help. I mean, this is a sort of conversation. These are the conversations we've been having with Russell since day one. And so we've been working on this since last year. That's why, as I said, we've been banking material with his help. And there was the whole thing with the strip and the editorial as well. I mean, yeah, obviously we all hope the Doctor Who is going to be absolutely massive. And we all remember how big it was during his first administration, as we might call it.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't it be great if Doctor Who was that big again? And it's going to have a global audience. of the kind it's probably never had before,
Mm-hmm.
thanks to Disney Plus.
Yeah.
However, an awful lot has changed. An awful lot has changed in the world of television since 2005, and a lot's changed in the world of publishing since 2005. And I think, the world of publishing is a much more challenging environment than it was even 5 years ago, let alone back in 2005.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I don't doubt that the Doctor Who is heading for a major revitalization, and I think a huge renaissance. The magazine, I think, dare I say it, has already enjoyed quite a renaissance, and it's already enjoyed a boost in popularity as well, despite the fact that, unfortunately, because of the way things are, we've had to put the price up.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't seem to have dented people's enthusiasm for the magazine. I'm very relieved to say people have stayed loyal to us, which I'm very thankful for. And I hope, as I said earlier, that we can compete with all the free stuff that's going to be out there just by providing a depth of coverage and the kind of access that you're just not going to find anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I can come back to the comic strip. I think that's a great example of that, actually, because since we last spoke, the comic strip has assumed a far greater importance to the magazine than it had before, to the extent that it's the only place where you can actually read the 14th Doctor's adventures. I think
Yeah.
that you can follow the 14th Doctor's adventures until the TV episodes begin.
Yeah.
And I think that Russell's decision to help us there really has placed the magazine, I hope, in the vanguard of the merchandise that will be created to tie in with these new. And so, yeah, it kind of feels like new territory, I think. But I hope that the magazine will continue to occupy a very important place in that.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, especially with Russell Davies backing you up and like you said, providing you the access and the behind the scenes ability to bring all that kind of stuff to the fans. And DWM is the best place to find that stuff, and in a lot of cases the only place to find that stuff. So the magazine is providing for those of us fans who like hearing about the behind the scenes and hearing about what's the teasers of what's going to be coming up and how things are being made and stuff. To me, it's essential reading. It's something that I eagerly look forward to it being released and being able to download onto my iPad and devour from issue to issue.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm so glad that people have stayed loyal to us, because we've had some tricky times, as we discussed during our last conversation. Everyone had tricky times during the pandemic, The fact that through that and the magazine has grown and evolved. I mean, who could have predicted the last time we spoke that the comic strip in particular would once again be spoken about as arguably the most important, the most anticipated element of the magazine.
Exactly.
I couldn't have predicted that, but I couldn't be happier about it.
Well, me too, as a longtime Doctor Who comic fan, having I remember seeing the tease on the cover of the kind of the new version of Doctor Who magazine, and that having the comic strip mentioned on the cover was big news to me. That showed to me in how important it is going forward from this point. So it definitely made me put a big old grin on my face.
Yeah, and I think that even though the comic strip represents the ongoing story of Doctor Who, at least until the episodes are back on television, I love the way we've been able to incorporate some nods to the past. Probably seen the TV21 influence.
Oh, definitely.
That's the thing about Lee is that he's so good at drawing Daleks that he's actually able to not only pay homage to the way that other people drew Daleks, notably Ron Turner.
Uh-huh.
But he's also able to sort of draw Daleks that aren't quite correct as well, and do that info point Daleks. When we had a long discussion about this, about what it should look like.
Uh-huh.
And we decided they should look like slightly sort of not right Daleks. The proportions should be slightly wrong, which is consistently wrong. And we decided they should look like the plastic Daleks that you were able to get in Woolworths in the 1960s.
Sure.
He did it perfectly. Not only can Lee, draw perfect Lee Daleks, he can draw perfect Ron Turner Daleks and perfect Gone Wrong Daleks that don't even look like Daleks.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's no limit to that man's talents.
Oh, I know the last issue that came out, I was overjoyed to see the Pentaray in the Dalek Museum, because not too long ago I did a review of that very strip from TB21.
Wow. Well, you are. You say, well, there's something with Dalek scholars everywhere, isn't there?
Uh-huh. Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Even those of us who love those strips from so many years ago, it's wonderful stuff.
Oh, definitely. And Doctor Who magazine is wonderful stuff as well. And Marcus, I know you're a busy gentleman. I know you got a new issue of Doctor Who magazine that you're hard at work on. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me and kind of get me and my listeners up to speed as to what's going on in the workings of Doctor Who magazine and Panini.
Well, thank you for the kind words. It's always lovely to talk to you.
Many thanks to outgoing editor Marcus Hearn for chatting with me, taking time out of a really busy schedule. He was chatting with me the night that he was finishing up the editing of the new issue of Doctor Who magazine before it went to press. So he was nice enough to spend some time chatting with me and letting me know what was going on with the magazine. And best wishes to him. I look forward to seeing him working on the bookazines, and I know he's done an awesome job as editor. So thanks once again, Marcus. And thank all of you out there who have downloaded this episode and have listened to it. And I really appreciate you taking time to listen to this podcast and find out more about Doctor Who comics. I know a lot of people really love the interviews and hearing what people who have worked on the comic strip or on the magazine, how they got into Doctor Who, what it's like working on a project like this. So I hope you enjoyed the interview with Marcus. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to get caught up on previous episodes, if this is your very first episode, you can always go on your podcast feed and get back episodes, older episodes. Any of them with interviews on there are always good to listen to. I enjoy chatting with the people, so I'm assuming that you enjoy listening to me chat with the people. But if you want to go all the way back to the beginning, make sure you check out archive.org and do a search for Jeremy B. Ment or Doctor Who Panel to Panel. And you can find all the previous episodes. It's easy to download MP3 files. And I think that's enough selfless promotion on my part. So until the next episode of Doctor Who Panel to Panel, thank you for listening and goodbye. Doctor Who Panel to Panel, the podcast about Doctor Who comics, thanks you for downloading this episode. Let us know what you thought about this episode or of Doctor Who comics in general. You can find us socially on Facebook at Doctor Who Panel to Panel, on Twitter at Doctor Who P2P, 2 being the number 2, and online at DoctorWhoComics.com. Download previous episodes via your favorite podcast service and find the complete catalog of episodes featuring amazing interviews with creators past and present at archive.org. Just search for Doctor Who Panel to Panel. Thank you.